Alright, yo, what's up, y'all? This video is gonna be on the Asian Indians.
And for those individual people out there who think Indians are not considered Asian, they are. You know, India is in Asia. For any of those people out there who don't know this, you know, and they have a lot of things in common with the Asian group, the other Asians out there. So yes, they are considered Asian. You know, I don't know. You know, it's funny to me. Some people want to consider them Middle Eastern. You know, I don't know where that came from because Eastern is not even a race. All right, they are considered Asian. That's why we're learning about them. We're also going to be learning about the Pacific Islanders. You know, they're not really considered Asians, but they are grouped in with the Asians. I don't know why we're going to be learning about them, but hey, but I guess I'll find out though. All right, so like.
The early immigrants, the early Asian Indian immigrants, they came to the States from 1906 to 1924. Over 97% of the first Indians that came to this country were men. You know, there was very few women that came during this time. More than half of the men were married, so they had to leave, you know, their wives and their children back in India. A lot of them had a very low education at this time, sort of like the first Chinese. They had a very low education. The first Indians were farmers. A lot of these Indians were referred to as Sikhs, or from Punjab, or as we would refer to them as Singhs. Probably have noticed some Indians that wear turbans. These are the people. These are what you call Sikhs. They're not allowed. They have to wear turbans. They're not allowed to cut their hair. They're not allowed to cut their facial hair, their beards. So that's why you see some of them who have turbans and they have a lot of facial hair. The majority, okay, and I'm speaking on the majority of Indians at this time. They wore shorts. These shorts, they were like underwear that they have to wear. They wear these things, these bracelets or iron bracelets that they have to wear, and two things that they have to carry with them at all times would be a comb and a dagger. So the reason why the Indians came to the States in the first place was to find work. You know, their plan was very similar to the first Chinese, I believe, the first Chinese, how they wanted to come to America, work really hard, earn a lot of money, and then eventually return back to India. You know, the Indians were the first in the lumber industry of the Northwest and railroads. They didn't work on the roads, but they helped fix them, sort of like the Japanese people did as well. And they later became migrant farm workers. So the government, they tried to restrict the Indians from coming to the States with the immigration of the Asian Indians in 1917. No, they didn't want the Indians coming to America, so they put this Immigration Act in 1917 to stop the growing Indian population in the States. But you know, as you notice with the Chinese, the first Chinese, Japanese, Filipinos, you know, the first Asian groups, they didn't like the Americans didn't like the Asians in the first place. They all wanted them out of the country, so they try to do everything possible to get them out of the country. You know, there was an exception to this rule. The students, ministers, teachers, and tourists that were of Indian descent, they were able to come to America. The ones that they didn't want in the country that were Indian, they didn't want the laborers, the workers. They didn't want them to come over. Those were the ones that they put this act in place. They're the ones that they didn't want coming to America, working here in the States. That's why this act was put in place. There was this U.S. case in 1923. It was the U.S. versus Singh. I hope I'm saying his name correctly. His case was he wanted to be neutralized. He wanted to be a citizen, a U.S. citizen. And at this time, Asians were not granted citizenship. They weren't really considered American citizens or American-born citizens, depending if they were born here. They were treated like second-class citizens. So, anyways, his argument was, that the Asian Indians should be considered. That the Asian Indians are considered Caucasian, white people. That's what his whole argument of this was. The Asian Indians were Caucasian, were whites, because they had some ancestries of Europeans. That was his whole case, his whole deal. So what the courts ruled was the court ruled that the law intent was white. Eventually, so ultimately his case got denied. I want to talk about the revolutionary movement. This movement was for the Indian. They wanted India to be free from Great Britain, from England. England had control over India. Sort of like how Spain took over the Philippines. They wanted their independence from, England. They got some financial support from Germany. England and Germany are enemies. They don't like each other. Alright. So what had happened was boats carried about 400 of the supporters who supported this with arms, but they were arrested. They had spies, and people were watching them, so it didn't do well. One of the most common marriages were interracial marriages. A lot of the Indian men at this time married Mexican women. So you're probably wondering why. Well, for one, being that they met in the fields. That's how a lot of these marriages happen, is that a lot of the Indians and a lot of the Indian men and Mexican women worked in the fields. That's how they met. And that's probably what sparked a lot of these marriages. It's really different from the Filipinos, because the Filipinos, the reason why the Filipino men dated or married the Mexican women was because they were very similar in many ways. One being they're both Catholic, and for the other being that they both spoke Spanish, because the Philippines have a lot of Spanish influences because of Spain. So commonly at this time, the Indian men were about 10 to 20 years older than the Mexican female. In India, they would not approve of an Indian guy marrying a Mexican woman. It was frowned upon. It wasn't accepted. And the divorce rate for these couples was at around 20%. These couples had they came across some, they struggled. I'm not saying these marriages were easy, because they weren't. They had some culture clashes, being but being in the marriage, you have to compromise, which is what they did. So how did they raise their children? They raised their children speaking English and Spanish. They had their children's first names Spanish, and their last names would be an Indian name, so you can so they can kind of identify them as being mixed. The Mexican female was Catholic, and say the Indian guy was Muslim. They kept their religions, so there was no problem right there. So I want us to talk about a very famous an Asian Indian. His name is Dalip Saund. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sorry for the mispronunciation. He had a degree in math from India. He earned his PhD in math and his MA in agriculture. He was the first Asian congressman in 1957, and he was re-elected twice. So this guy, he was really important. To see someone of color, in Congress or in the White House, that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Especially because you just don't see a lot of blacks and Asians in positions like that. I wish we saw more. Will we ever see an Asian president one day? I doubt it, but anything's possible. Barack Obama, he's president, so anything is possible. I'm not gonna say no, but I doubt it. I really do doubt it, but you just never know. Alright, so let me talk about the culture identity. The men wore turbans. These dresses that these Indian women would wear are called Sari. Called a Sari. They would wear these daily. Some of them would wear them daily. Others would wear them just on special cultural events or special occasions. So if you ever wondered why some of the Indian women had a dot in the middle of their forehead, that symbolizes what you call a Bindi, and these women wear them. It represents that they're married. Alright, and this is big in Indian culture. A married Indian woman is not allowed to shake a male's hand because they're married. They can shake a female, but not a female's hand, but not a male. Their culture is very strict. So just be aware of that for anybody who might stumble upon that. You're not allowed to shake a married woman's hand, right? They wear a lot of gold jewelry. That includes like earrings, necklaces, anklets, bracelets, hair ornaments. So these women also faced a ton of verbal harassment on the streets. Why? Because people didn't understand their culture, the Indian culture. When people don't understand something, then they're gonna question it. And some people might make fun of it. And these women had to deal with people's ignorance and being harassed for something, for their culture, for taking pride in their culture, or for doing cultural things, for being themselves. They're getting harassed for this, which is really, really sad. So food. Let me talk a little bit about the food, the Indian food. Hindus are vegetarians. Some of the Sikhs, they're not allowed to eat beef, and the Muslims, they're not allowed to eat pork. I want to talk about this festival that they have. It's called the Feast of Lights in New York. This happened in New York City. So I want to talk a little bit about this. This was it was sponsored by the Association of Indians in America in October. It's a big celebration with fireworks and everything that they do. They have food food booths and other regional cuisine. They have things for the children to do. They have activities that the children can do, participate in, like puppet shows, painting, flower garlands, and drawings. They have arts and crafts that you can buy for sale. They put on performances as well. And the majority of the people that would show up to this event would be the middle and the upper class Asian Indians. I want to talk about the family, the Indian family, and the second generation Indians. So the Indian men had to get their green cards, and to show that they're legal here in the States. And they wanted to bring their wives and their family over here to the States. And that's what a lot of them did, So the wives and the children kind of had to stay behind, while the Indian husband went to a foreign land that he's never been to and tried to find work and kind of make a living here, get started here, and then eventually bring his family over when he was able to, And so let me talk about the marriages. A lot of the Indians have arranged marriages. They don't get to pick who they're going to be with. It's already arranged from a from birth, basically, at a very young age, and they don't meet their brides or their husbands until the day of the wedding. The second generation females, they don't want guys from India. They don't want Indian guys from India. Because they view the Indian guys from India as being shy, poorly dressed, and awkward. However, these men view the females as bad wives. Some of the second generation, guys want Indian wives, but they worry about them as being Indian, as they worry about them being green card chasers, which means they only want to be with this Indian guy, so that they can get something out of it in return, meaning that if they want to get out of India, then they have to find a guy to help them get to the States. So it's sort of like they're using the guy, the husband, in a way. So, and the majority will marry. The differences between Asian Indians and other Asian groups. A lot of them are college graduates. A lot of them are college grads. Over 60% are, compared to 40% of the other Asian groups. Less than 5% are on welfare compared to the others. And over 50% of them are professionals. They have an occupation. And over 90% of Indian families are still together. They have two parents. They're two parents. Their parents are still together. That's basically what that means. And in today's society, Indians have achieved and accomplished many things over the years. They're able to succeed in whatever they want to do in life or as an occupation. Some of them are lawyers, doctors. Others of them own convenience stores, gas stations. Some of them are taxi drivers. So it's opened the doors for them, because say like 50 or 60 years ago, they wouldn't have been able to do these things that they're able to do. They wouldn't have been able to achieve or accomplish what they wanted to do here in the States. And it was a rough time for them. But and generally Asians had it pretty bad.
in the beginning. You know, in today's society, you know, things have changed, views have changed, a lot of things have changed over the years. I'm not saying that it's the best, you know, because I still think that it could be better for some ethnic groups and races, but you know, it's a work in progress. You know, things don't happen overnight. It takes time, and you know, it's a good thing that these Asian groups have excelled in whatever that they want to achieve, and they're doing well for themselves. You know, I don't hate on that, so keep doing what you're doing. You know, as long as you're making moves in the right directions and you're doing what you got to do to make it, then you know, I support that. You know.
Alright, so that's the end of this video of the Asian Indians. Hopefully you like learning a little bit about the history about the Asian Americans, how they immigrated to this country, and some of their cultural things that they do. This is what I've been learning in my Asian American Studies class. And if you want to learn more about, you know, the history on Asian Americans and ultimately the cultures of these different ethnic groups, then I really suggest you take an Asian American Studies class. You know, like I said a million times, you don't have to be Asian to take the class. You know, there are people in the class who are not Asian. There's like 3 or 4. So, you know, step outside your box. Do something that you've never done before. You know, take a chance. Do something different. Don't worry about what everyone else thinks of you, you know, because I'm doing it right now. You know, this is something I would have done a year ago. You know, I would have thought you were crazy if you would have told me that I'd be taking an Asian American Studies class, because, you know, I wouldn't have. You know, I took it for the wrong reasons, but, you know, I'm enjoying the class. We have less than a month and a half left to go in the class, so I'm learning a lot. We still have about 4 other Asian groups to learn about, like the Cambodians, the Laos, the Vietnamese, so I'm really excited, and I'm gonna be making videos on my progress, and you know, I'm learning so much on the Asian Americans that I thought I'd share my knowledge and what I've been learning in these classes, you know, to you, to whoever's watching this or who is interested in learning. So that's what these videos are for. You know, I'm gonna be making more universal videos once this class is done. You know, hopefully you learn something, and I have more videos coming up. Check them out. All right, comment, subscribe, rate if you like my videos. All right, so talk to you guys later. All right, late.